Uhuru. Welcome to Uhuru Congo. This is a program of the African Socialist International, or the ASI. I am the chairman of the African Socialist International, and I am doing this program with Comrade Luwezi, Kinshasa. I am located in the United States. I'm in St. Petersburg, Florida, in the United States. Comrade Luwezi, Kinshasa is the Secretary General of the African Socialist International. He's located in London, England, but he was born and lived in Congo. He is from Congo. His family, much of his family still is in Congo, and he is closely connected to the life and struggles of our people in the Congo. We have initiated this show, Uhuru Congo, subsequent to the election that happened in Congo in late December, the last of December, where a person, Kabila, Joseph Kabila, reviled by most of the African people in Congo, supported by various sectors of imperialism and neo-colonial forces in Africa, particularly and in places like Rwanda and Congo, where Kabila clearly lost the election and faced serious militant demonstrations, uprising by African people there. We were extremely concerned because the imperialist ruling class, media, were not writing at all about what was happening in Congo, or only tiny amounts of information. In most instances, it was disinformation was getting out. And in fact, the government of Kabila, Joseph Kabila in Congo, had shut down social media for a period of time, and our brothers and sisters who are in Congo could not communicate with anybody outside of the country. Through pressures from the masses of the people from below and from imperialist powers from above, Kabila did finally release the result of what he characterized as the result of the presidential election that resulted in a person coming to power, not Kabila's designated successor, and not the person who had obviously won the election, but somebody with whom he was able to make a deal, did make a deal, and this man is Yeshitela. And so we felt like it was important for the African People's Socialist Party, or as we're known internationally, the African Socialist International, to intervene in this struggle. We are concerned about taking revolutionary organization, revolutionary theory and politics to the struggle in Congo. And we felt like also it was important to bring African people from around the world into this struggle and this discussion by making information available that would not necessarily be available otherwise, and by bringing analysis to the situation and developments in Congo. I'm going to move now and bring Comrade Luwezi into this discussion. In fact, he will be leading most of this discussion, and the objective again is to share information with people around the world so that the struggle in Congo is not happening in isolation, to help African people around the world understand the relationship of the struggle in Congo to the overall struggle for the liberation, unification of Africa and African people worldwide under the leadership of the African working class, and to win people to a recognition that it is not enough just to be opposed to what's happening to us in Congo or any place else, but organization is absolutely necessary, and that the vehicle that has been created for the liberation of African people under the leadership of the African working class is the African People's Socialist Party, recognized as African Socialist International worldwide. So Comrade Luwezi, why don't you go ahead and start us off and help us to understand what's going on in Congo. Uhuru.
Well, thank you so much for the overview. As always, it really helps anyone who missed the previous programs or just join in to have a very insightful understanding of what happens just in the last 2 months and where we need to go. Every day is full of news. When you listen to Congo, every day it brings on loads of news, new stuff. Like today, there are already 2 points that stand out. Among other things that we didn't even put in the program because it would just pack the program. But the first one is the United States has imposed or added on the list of sanctions Corneille Nangaa. Corneille Nangaa is not just anybody. He is the head of the infamous CENI, using the French acronym of National Independent Electoral Commission, the body that's supposed to be organizing the elections in the Congo. The presidential, the parliamentary, the municipals, and the provincial elections, all that stuff. Corneille Nangaa is the head of that. And today the United States government announced that Corneille Nangaa also is on a list of people under sanctions. And it means that he cannot go to the United States. And also any asset, well, I don't know for whole asset, you don't know exactly with the U.S., because these are the guys the U.S. praises for years. It means also his asset, or some of his assets are frozen. And these basically puts pressure on the side of Kabila's government. It's just a selective list. And why the U.S. is doing that? Why the U.S. is putting Nangaa on a list of people under sanctions? And the reasons given is that because of corruption and illicit enrichment. As if you can get rich under colonialism, honestly. It doesn't work. You cannot be rich without being a crook, an exploiter, a parasite. And the United States itself was born like that. And so they selected Nangaa now to add on the list. And we can see clearly there is a power struggle going on in the Congo. Kabila came to power under the tutelage, under the leadership of the United States government through Paul Kagame and Museveni. That's how Kabila came to power. And he couldn't come to power without the consentment of the United States government. And today, why the U.S. is putting under sanctions some of the members who are in entourage of Joseph Kabila. As I said, there's a power struggle going on in the Congo. You heard the chairman saying clearly Joseph Kabila did not win the elections, but he didn't win the election in 2011 or in 2006. He never won any elections. Why is it an issue today? Just because it's becoming clear that Kabila has allowed the Chinese and the Indian in the system. And you remember Zuma was the strongest supporter of Joseph Kabila. But beyond Zuma, there was a power struggle between the emerging or the new capitalists coming from India.
You mean
China.
Jacob Zuma? Jacob Zuma,
Zuma,
former president of South Africa and head of the African National Congress.
Right.
Go ahead. Okay.
Correct, Chairman. Yeah, Jacob Zuma basically was working with the Gupta families, basically with the Indian bourgeoisie, to open up more Africa to the capital from India. And raw material is one of those places all the capitalists coming to Africa want to be. They don't come into Africa to transform technology. or to transfer technology. You say, you give us your mineral and we're going to transform, we're going to do a transfer of technology. No, they're not doing that. They coming also to access raw material. And Kabila has opened up to China and India in a very serious way. We will come back in the subsequent programs on that. And here's something, the Belgium, the British, the German, the US, all of them are opposed to that. But it's also part of the balance, the struggle for, in the balance of power that's happening in the world. Rising China, rising India, and these manifest themselves in many places in the world. Not just in Asia, but it manifests itself in Africa. China being one of the great exploiter of the raw material in Africa, in the Congo, or China being one of the power that has acquired military bases like in Djibouti. All these are manifestations of that. So the United States are definitely responding to that. And this does not mean the United States doesn't have an interest in the Congo. They do. They do have AFRICOM in Chugu, in the eastern Congo. They do have access to raw material. They do. All kind of stuff. But just don't want to be disrupted or challenged. They want to keep a monopoly on the control of the resources. That's definitely is sure. So they're responding to that. And another aspect they're responding to that, we know the guy who's supposed to have won the elections, which is Martin Fayulu. Fayulu is campaigning. He has not stopped campaigning. He's moving from city to city and gathering hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. And clearly, you can see there's an intention there to maintain the mobilization of Fayulu. And this would definitely, there's no doubt, when you see the alliance led by Fayulu, he has Katumbi, pro-Belgian, pro-US. He had Bemba, just released from ICC prison for the election. So they can campaign. All these guys represent the old guard of imperialism. So you can see Fayulu, what you represent, and why they want Fayulu to assume the leadership of the mass movement around the electoral arena, which used to be controlled by Tshisekedi, who is now the president. So basically, his party is losing, and it's going to lose basically support from masses of the people. So that definitely is one news that you can say is not in the Congo. The continuous pressure from the United States to position Fayulu and also to protect his own interests. The other news is the death of Antoine Gizenga. Gizenga, when I was growing up, when I was like under 10 years old, most of us heard about Antoine Gizenga. He was like a mythical name, for us, because this guy was with Lumumba. So to us, he was just like another incarnation of Lumumba. But the first time people were able to meet Gizenga is when Mobutu in 1992 opened up what they call the National Conference.
Yeah.
Gizenga was allowed in after almost 30 years in exile. It was some 25 years in exile, something like that, because he went in exile in the 60s, like 65, 66, something like that. And so he returned in 1992 or 1991. And we were shocked that this guy didn't organize any summation, any mass meetings, any campaign on anything. People were expecting him to mobilize the poor people because it was understood that Lumumba was for the people. So if you are Lumumbist, and in fact, his political organization is known as Parti Lumumbiste Unifié, which is Unified Lumumbiste Party. And we saw nothing of Lumumba, no study on Lumumba, nothing like that. And the people were shocked and disappointed. I said, this guy, He's not leading a mass movement. He's not educating the people. If you're a Lumumbist, you must educate the people. You know, you must bring the truth to the people about the system. He didn't do none of these things. So that was the first time it became clear to many of us, this guy has nothing to do with Lumumba. But worse than anything else is that in 2003, he accepted to become the Prime Minister. No, not 2003, 2006, after the election 2006. He accepted to become the Prime Minister of Joseph Kabila, which everyone, the majority of people in the Congo, recognize Kabila's government as a colonial government, occupation government. That's what they refer to as a regime. And that this guy, Antoine Gizenga, accepted to be his Prime Minister. So he was Prime Minister for something at least 3 years, and then he stepped down, and his party provided the next Prime Minister to the regime of Joseph Kabila. And the man who succeeded him, his name is Muzito. And the Muzito is also one of the co-founders, if I might say, of the alliance in support of Fayulu. So you begin to see who Fayulu is. So, just to be short, Gizenga was the Prime Minister of Kabila for 3 years, and his party provided the next Prime Minister of this regime. And this definitely has brought a bad name to Lumumba's name. For people who are educated, for the people who only know that Lumumba is associated with Gizenga and Gizenga's party, they say, oh, they're all the same. You can't tell the difference. People say, you say one thing, but when you get to power, you do another thing. And of course, those who understand who Lumumba was, they use that to create all kinds of confusion. Like the Minister for Information of the last Kabila's government referred to himself as Lumumbis. Every time he's on the TV, particularly when they have a disagreement with the United States or Belgian government, they always say, as Lumumbis, we don't agree with the Belgian government because we are a sovereign country. That they stop all these kind of nonsense and things like that. And at the end of the day, people are confused who Lumumba was, and nobody talks about Lumumba as they used to, like 20 or 30 years ago. Even the last election, there has not been anybody discussing about Patrice Lumumba, and the slander on Patrice Lumumba has gone unchallenged because of Gizenga and other people are like that. So the death of Gizenga is not a death we're going to mourn. We're not going to say we are upset because he's dead. We're not going to say, you know, we're going to mourn him like Dedan Kemajo or Malcolm X or Lumumba himself. No. It's the death of an opportunist. That's what we're talking about. It's the death of someone who betrayed the revolution in the Congo. We're talking of someone who betrayed Patrice Lumumba's struggle and ideals, you know, all those kind of things. And someone who betrayed the poor people, the workers, and the peasants. And somebody who allied himself with colonialism, with imperialism. And he should be denounced. If we go judge dead bodies, we will judge dead bodies when black power is, you know, is in full swing everywhere. You know, if we're going to dig bodies, that was the body should dig and, you know, and punish it. But just to be short, he's the death of an opportunist. And it just gives us an opportunity to say that the real Lumumbist is to continue the revolution. It's to continue to organize the African workers and peasants to solve the question that Lumumba didn't solve. Lumumba didn't build a revolutionary party. Yeah. And it is our job to build the African People's Socialist Party so we can contribute to the creation of the African Socialist International. That is the job of anyone who believes in Lumumba today, in the Congo or anywhere else. And that's the job he's saying I couldn't do. For the simple reason he represents the African petit bourgeoisie, the enemy of the African revolution from within. That's basically what we like people to understand. so we can move forward.
Uhuru.
Chairman.
Yeah, I think part of this entire struggle that we are involved in this era, Lumumba was an incredibly significant historical force, and that's one of the reasons he can't be talked about in Congo today, certainly by the neo-colonial forces who now would have people think that they are Lumumba's. But I think that part of what we're looking at is this whole being locked into this whole narrow nationalist perception of our reality and conditions as African people. And the truth of the matter, of course, is that we are not only Africans, but we are the African working class, and we are the poor peasantry. And while the imperialist powers have created these structures for us, they've created these borders, and they've defined what they call these countries that we are supposed to be living in, and sometimes they even call them nations. The reality is that the African working class and poor peasantry has no country, and that these thugs who we find ourselves having to follow all the time because they've been defined for us, do not represent the interests of the African working class. And it doesn't matter what ethnic group they come from, or what part of Africa we live in, or whether we live in Africa or some other places around the world. And I think that's one of the things that makes the African Socialist International, building the African People's Socialist Party, the revolutionary organization of the African working class, so important. And related to that, of course, is the issue that we are always confronted with, that helps to always give us an understanding of our conditions, is this question of prison and prisoners. In the United States, Secretary General, you may know, you probably do know, that almost half, perhaps as many as half the people who are locked up in prison in the United States are Africans, and yet they claim that Africans only make up 13, 14% of the population, yet we make up at least half the prison population. And you mentioned Djibouti, the place that functions sort of as an aircraft carrier. It's for most of the imperialist powers and China, etc. There are more there are more people in prison, Africans who are in prison in the United States than there are people who are in Djibouti, than there are people in Equatorial Guinea. And perhaps as many people in prison, Africans in prison in the United States, as there are people in Namibia. But prisons is something that afflicts and affects the colonized population, not only in the United States, but around the world. And in Congo, for example, we're looking at the treatment of African people, the death of people in prison. Can you say something about that?
Yes, Chairman. This question of prisons is not really much talked about, for the simple reason that the struggle, what is defined as a struggle, is basically competition for neo-colonial power through elections. That's what people see as a struggle. You meet all those Africans from Senegal, from Congo, from elsewhere. When you go to their meetings, you will see the main agenda, if not the only agenda, is basically how to support such political party or such individual so we can go to power. So electoral politics, national liberation out of the window, recognition of the masses out of the window, defend democratic struggle for the people out of the window. So in the places like Congo, one of the two being used from colonial time is been prison. One of the first person to emerge as a national figure under Belgian colonization was a man called Simon Kimbangu. I always believe Simon Kimbangu was linked to Garvey, because if we see people who claim to be his followers today, the way they dress like Marcus Garvey's followers, and they spoke about the same thing. But the point I want to make is that these anti-colonial leader, he was arrested and locked up like Garvey in the U.S., but he was locked up for 30 years, from 1921 to 1951. So he spent most of his time in prison, and he died there. And it is significant. He really highlights straight away the role of prison, because most of the prison, or not most, all the prisons built in Africa, and in Congo, definitely, were built by colonizer, by colonialism. So you can see the prison is definitely a function of colonialism, of enforcing colonialism. You can't have colonialism without prison. It doesn't exist, because that's one way to organize population control. And now, one of the manifestations of prison today is that most prisons we have been built during colonial time. And the Negroes in power, they have not built massive prisons like the Belgians did. And what they do, they staff as many people as they can in prison. So I'll take one example. This is the prison, the central prison in Matadi. Matadi is a city in Lower Congo, or what they call Lower Congo province. And Matadi is like one of the main cities, if not the main city there. So in central prison there, the capacity of that central prison was 150 people when the Belgians built it. Today, at any time you go to that jail, there are between 700 and 800 Africans rotting in the jail. And when I say rotting, I just mean rotting. First, there were only 2 toilets in Matadi Central Prison. You can just imagine, even anyway, when you have even 30 people, 2 toilets seem already to be not enough. Now, how the hell are you going to have 2 toilets for 800 or 700 people, unless you want them to die? And that's exactly what's happening in the prison in Matadi. And not just in that prison, all the prisons across, if I say across Congo, it's true, across Africa, generally speaking, the prisons are a place where you send to die. And if you don't want to die, you have to pay the prison authority more money so they can allow you to be treated as a so-called human being. So you pay for your food, you don't eat the poisoned food, that they give to prisoners. You have to pay, your family has to find the money to pay them so you can be treated differently. If you're sick, they get you the medicine you need. So in that prison in Matadi, in the 10 days, 5 people have died. And since the beginning of this year, since January of this year, 14 people have died. For the simple reason, the food they're given is inadequate, and there is no access to health care. If you're sick, you're just sick, unless you find the money. They'll find you a nurse or a doctor and the medicine you need. And if you're working class, as most of the people go to jails are working class, and the workers are poor people, it means you're going to die. And you can pull the statistics if we have time by doing a compilation for all those prisons across the country there. It will give us an idea how people are dying. And it's not different between them and those 4 million Africans stuck in what they call concentration camps, because there is ongoing policies to force people out of villages, of the towns, to give way to parasitic mining national companies. Remember, one of the U.S. leaders, I don't remember the name, I have the name somewhere, when Mobutu was overthrown, it could be Bill Richardson, one of them. He said, Congo natural resources is untapped. Is untapped. So now we need to have access to it, which means that most of the villages, most of the Congo sits on the raw material, because it is the herb, it's scent of the herb basically. For some reason, you have all kinds of resources located there. Every city, the rivers, Congo rivers, and all these places are on oil or gas or some diamond or something like that. So everywhere is a policy to expel people from the territories, from the villages and so on, and replace them by mining companies and things like that. And part of that is population control. The people who are forced to flee, you put them in a concentration camps. That's where they are, where they basically are left to die. And then you have all these NGOs and people like that simply expressing new medicine, doing all these population control policies and things like that. And that's where we are. So part of our job basically is to organize, to build a party in the Congo and mobilize the people to fight against all colonial conditions, in the process to build for the space we need to build revolution. For space, we need to win the people, to win everybody to revolution. That's the only solution. So we can advance the process, unify African people, unify African people everywhere. So, these are some of the things we can say. And until the party is built there, I guarantee you will not hear anybody talking of mobilizing the people to fight against the colonial condition in the prison. You won't hear that. The people are just no interest in that. They're interested in going to power so they can fill the pocket, have a bank account, buy houses in Europe and things like that. That's what they're interested in.
Well,
and exit.
The evidence of the class character of the youth of prisons against Africa and African people is made obvious by the fact that you have a situation where so-called independent, so-called post-apartheid South Africa, the prisons are still filled with African people and they're growing more and more every day. And Africans who were even imprisoned under the apartheid regime, nobody's talking about freeing them. And in fact, some people who are actually part of the freedom struggle are still locked up in prisons in South Africa. You don't hear a single word coming from the ANC, from either Zuma or from the guy who followed him. You didn't hear from Nelson Mandela. You didn't hear from Mbeki. None of them talked about freeing those African people in prison who were mostly the African working class. And then the same thing is true in the United States, that there can be some kind of general discussion about, they like to talk about how the mass incarceration of African people, but even that characterization is something that obscures the fact that we're talking about human beings, black people, and there's no outcry, there's no ongoing outcry, no criticism. They can talk about mass incarceration of African people in general and abstract terms, but they can't talk about the ongoing arrest of African people by cops all around this country in the African working class community. So clearly, this issue of prison is something that the African working class can only take on, and that's why the African working class must have its own revolutionary party. That's why building the African People's Socialist Party and intervening in the struggle in Congo is a critical question, but prisons that's just one of the things that we're looking at. We just saw the elections, we're talking about prison, and then of course we're talking about the murder of African people, and of course why don't you introduce the video that we're going to show now about the massacre in Yumbi and Beni, where the African workers are being killed there, just as they killed in South Africa, killed in various other places where we are located. Can you introduce these two videos we're going to look at?
Yeah, basically what people will be watching is images of the ongoing counter-insurgency. We just mentioned that you can't have colonialism without prison, which means you can't have colonialism without counter-insurgency. It's going on all the time. We rise or we don't rise, it's going all the time. It's a class struggle against the African workers and poor peasants. So what's happening now, I talked about expelling people from the area where they can extract mines and stuff like that. It happens to be there are serious mineral deposits. I have a document, but don't have it at home, where they lay out the mineral deposit in the Yumbi, in that region. So part of the struggle basically is to begin to destabilize that community, break the unity of Africans there, because these are so-called two ethnic groups who live together for, I don't know, all the time. There has never been a struggle. It's those two. There are some people, intermarriage, and things like that. All of a sudden, the army appeared there early in December, 28th of December, and launched an attack on one group of people. And from there, we just heard that people have been fleeing to Congo Brazzaville and things like that. And the government decided there would not be elections in that region. Use the national election to elect the president. In that region, they didn't vote. They were banned from voting. The government, Kabila, pretexted that because of insecurity. But they created insecurity by sending the army there and the militias, state-controlled, to kill the people. But the background there is to break the unity of the people and facilitate any mining operation in the future or something like that. That's basically one thing we know. That's in the Yumbi. This has been going on in the Beni since 1997, and particularly in the last 5 years, since 2004, at least 5,000 have been assassinated in the Beni. And in the Beni, it's done in a very skillful way. They targeted intellectuals who might have outspoken against colonial occupation over there. They targeted, I can think of a priest called Vincent Masoji. He's just one of them. They assassinated, targeted killing. They burned hospitals, health centers, they burned that. They destroy schools. So it's a long-term destabilization. It's not some things done randomly by somebody who believes I'm not the same ethnic group as you. This condescending is a military response towards to the high schools of condescendency in imperialist centers like in the US, Germany, France. That's what they're implementing. Destruction of schools, destruction of hospitals, and poisoning of a water well. That kind of things. That's basically what happened in the UMB just 2 months ago. Yes, we were, Chairman.
Well, let's look at the video.
Now I have to emphasize that 890 is the number of people that we know were actually buried. But there are reports that many others may have been killed and their bodies may have been dumped in the Congo River or they may have been burned to death.
Jean Bienvenu is a former associate of opposition politician Jean-Pierre Bemba. In 2008, he had to leave his hometown of Kinshasa, fleeing state persecution.
It's very tough seeing what's happening in Kinshasa but not being able to go back. It's not easy.
He is just one of some 15,000 citizens of the Democratic Republic of the Congo that now live across the border in Congo-Brazzaville. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, nearly 750,000 Congolese have fled the various conflicts in their home country. So far, Uganda has taken in the most Congolese refugees, with many living in harsh conditions in camps surrounding Lake Albert. Jerome has lived here since the age of 9. He is not optimistic about the likelihood of change in his country of origin.
Why would I go back to the Congo? I would just have to come back here again because of the war.
Some refugees put down roots in their host country, like here in the Zambian capital of Lusaka. Bernard Pierre Lukungu has lived here since 1993. He also has his worries about the election back in the DRC.
We are almost 25,000. And if truly things will go, haywire, we're afraid many will enter Zambia. And then it is a situation that we don't want to happen, because this will destabilize this country. We don't want that.
They hope that the upcoming election will bring change that will allow their lives to return to normal. If not, many may choose to join the large community of citizens who have sought to live their lives elsewhere.
Uhuru, I just think it's really important to say that we're not just looking at evil people, people who are just doing things because they're evil or because they're mean. But there's a whole system that has been created through enslaving our people, through taking Africa, which is our mother country, through confusing us and keeping us confused about the fact that Africa is the birthright of African people everywhere around the world. And when I say Africa, I'm not talking about some abstract territory, some abstract piece of land. I'm talking about all the resources in Africa that's being stolen from us on a regular basis. They've been human resources, they're material resources. You can't go to a supermarket or a shopping mall without seeing the consequence of theft of African resources. You can't buy aluminum foil without looking at the consequence of what has been stolen from Guinea in terms of the raw materials that's necessary for bauxite, for making aluminum. I mean, some things are obvious, like the gold and the diamonds, etc. But I think it's really important for us to understand that, that Africa is under assault and African people are under assault on a regular basis. And one of the most significant things that the imperialists have been able to do in capturing our Africa and imposing on us a misunderstanding of who the hell we are and what it is that we're about, so that we become quote-unquote citizens of hostile entities and get used against our own people. If we don't know we're Africans, we think that we are some kind of Americans or some kind of Brit or some kind of Belgium or some kind of Swede or something to that effect, or we think that we are Ghanaians, or we think that we are Nigerians or Sudanese, and we can get used again and do get used against our own interests, against our own people. Like, it's critical for us to understand that we are starving and being exploited horribly all around the world, and the future of our children is being stolen from us, like our resources. It's important. People say, well, you know, everything is not money. It's important to have resources. We have to feed our children. We have to be able to build infrastructure where we are. We have to bring science. We have to pave streets and kill mosquitoes and do all those kinds of things that would be normally done if it were not for the intervention of white power. In fact, most of the problems as we are afflicted with, even as Africans or peoples around the world, would not exist if it were not for the advent of a social system that was born as a parasite, that can only survive, that can only be successful to the extent that it is capable of keeping Africans and other people living in misery and poverty. I think it's extremely important for us to understand that. And also, so that's what we're looking at. We're looking at massacres in Congo, when we're looking at police killings in Houston, Texas, when we're looking at the fact that in Haiti, we just see a handful of mercenaries. We call them mercenaries, but they are people who are quote-unquote formerly U.S. special forces, from Navy SEALs and stuff like that, armed to the teeth, riding around in Haiti with no license plates in their vehicles and things like that, and said that they were on a mission after they were captured. They're on a mission. They're working for the United States government at a time where the Haitian regime is in serious trouble because of the growing immiseration of our people there, and because the fact is that Haiti has been, as an African country, has been under assault since its inception, since the inception of Haiti, since the beginning of what we now know as Haiti or Haiti, which African people created upon defeating France and winning our freedom and that territory. It has been under assault. It's under assault now. And it will never be free as some little plot in the Caribbean. It's a part of the African nation, and we have to recognize that, and the fact that we are in the condition we are because people are stealing our resources as a social system. People recognize it, call it imperialism, capitalism, what have you, but the whole colonial domination of African people dispersed around the world against our will, living in some form of slavery, that's what we are up against. That's what we have to organize around. That's why we have to have our own selfish, revolutionary organization, party of the African working class to win our freedom. So I just want to say that that's really important for us to understand. And now we hear that Tshisekedi, who has been installed in power by Kabila to be his public face, because even after they install Tshisekedi, Kabila controls the parliament, controls virtually every other significant institution in the government of Congo, and now we see Tshisekedi saying that all the Africans from Congo who are in exile, and they're in exile because they've been pushed out of the country by these puppet regimes that function as footstools, as doughboys, as servants of U.S. imperialism in particular. Now the imperialists give them permission to come back, and so Tshisekedi is calling on Congolese to come back to Congo, Africans from Congo. Luwezi, talk about it. Because I see that there were up to 4 million Africans who were forcibly internally displaced within the Congo, and that these are direct victims of the class war led by Kabila and the neo-colonial state against the toiling masses of Congo. There are 10 million Africans from Congo who are living outside of Congo. What happened to the thousands of deported every week from Angola since last year or in the previous years? What about those deported from Congo, Brazzaville in 2015 are still homeless in Kinshasa today? Can you speak to this at all, Comrade Luwezi? Have we lost contact with Luwezi? Is there, we're right at 10 minutes, so it's going to be, yeah, I can hear you now, Comrade Luwezi. We only have about 9 minutes. So can you speak about this? And of course, in so doing, there are people, who are looking for asylum in Europe and Asia and Canada and in the US and North and South Korea, et cetera. Talk to us about this massive displacement of African people, and Tshisekedi is saying that Africans can come back to the Democratic Republic of Congo now that he's in place.
Yes, Chairman. Basically, Tshisekedi knows very well that the Africans outside Congo are the one who have access to information, who follows every minute of what happens to Congo, what he does. And they can see clearly, as he said, he's under control of the ZW. They can see that. So he's definitely trying to do stuff that will buy him support or sympathy at least. And he came with this idea that for anyone who is a Congo national, if they want to go back to Congo, if they don't have a Congo passport, if they have like British passport or French passport, the US passport, things like that, you are not allowed to have dual citizenship. You must have only one citizenship. Therefore, if you want to go to Congo, you must apply for visa. And people are upset about that. They have to go home applying for visa. And they've been saying visa has to go. So again, instead of replying to that, he said, you don't have to go to the embassy to apply for visa. Just come straight to Kinshasa and you will get your visa at the airport. Basically, don't give the money to the ambassador. Give the money to my man who will be in control of the airports or the port, things like that. So that's displacing who will have access to the money. And our people are really up in arms. People are saying first, they are refugees from Congo who live in neighboring countries who are expelled on a regular basis, and when they return to Congo, there is no infrastructure to welcome all these people. There is nothing. And people live in Europe, some are workers, we do all kinds of jobs, and you want us to go back. Have you created any commission? Have you had any meetings with us? Have you prepared anything? People can see through that it's not serious, and people are really, really upset about that. They think you just want to get the money from us, and but this is a deeper question. It's also the question of all Africans going home. So how will they go home just because someone made a call like that? And it's something that I believe the revolutionary have to think about. The party has to think about. What does that mean going home? It begins by preparing everybody to take their place in a struggle for unification and liberation for Africa. That is a political move. If we're going home en masse collectively, it has to be for a collective purpose. It has to be, as the party is saying, claiming Africa. Claiming back Africa for ourselves. I think it has to go in that process. Not because we wanted to go and shore up the African bourgeoisie, or we want to give money, pay money to Felix Tshisekedi, because he wants to use that as a pawn in the process of maintaining his neocolonial power. Because he knows we know, and he knows masses of people are doing videos every day denouncing Felix Tshisekedi. He knows that, and we say it can't work like that. If we're going home, he will not set the terms like that. We have to participate in setting the terms. We don't want any African to go to Africa as a general matter of principle with a visa. You're going home. Doesn't matter if you're going to Congo or not. If you're going to South Africa or not, or Ivory Coast, it doesn't matter. Africa, going home is home. No Africa should be in jail in Africa anywhere because of so-called immigration stuff. No Africa should be paying money to anybody because of that. You're just going home. You don't pay a fine when you go and see your mommy and daddy or cousins, uncles. It doesn't make sense at all. So we're opposed to that.
I think that we're talking about going back home as individuals. We have to be reminded of what happened with Mulele. When Mobutu told him he could, Mulele, who tried to continue the movement of Lumumba and actually led a revolutionary struggle there, and was told by Mobutu that he could come back to the country.
That's correct, Chairman. Absolutely correct. That's how we lost Mulele.
Yeah.
He had a lot of followers in Congo Brazzaville.
Yeah.
And people told him not to go. Some people say he was drugged, but in final analysis, he went home. And how can you go home in the hands of Mobutu and Bombogoli's murderers? And they did just the same thing they've been doing all along, what they did to Lumumba. And they did that. So the question of collective return under the leadership of the party, I think, is a serious question. How do we go home?
Yeah.
It has to be organized. It has to be organized. It's not something you can take casually. In fact, some of the people have been raising that. They say, you can just call us to go home just like that. We have to plan. They say even the people who go home regularly, they even plan before they go home. It takes them months to organize to go home.
Well,
and these guys just make the call, come home.
It's not home yet, and that's the problem we have. It's not home yet, and it can only be home as a consequence of the revolutionary, and that's what Marcus Garvey talked about, Africa for Africans at home and abroad. And the assumption there was that the African people ourselves would assume control of our lives, and of course we don't have control of our lives, even if it's blackface, as long as neocolonialism exists, as long as imperial powers control our resources, etc. So I want to thank Comrade Secretary General for being here, and I want everybody to recognize that we're going to be doing this every Sunday. Uhuru Congo YouTube channel for the African Socialist International to help people understand more of what is happening in Congo right now, what it is that's going to take for us to win our freedom, and how we can contribute to the revolutionary overthrow of the neocolonial regime in Congo so that the African working class can stand on its own 2 feet and control the future, create the future that's necessary for our well-being. Comrade Luwezi, you only have a few seconds if there's something that you want to say.
Yes, I just want to say we are looking at two things. But one is a regular meeting, public meeting we're going to have monthly in London. That will be on the 30th of March. You know, we're looking at Brexit. Because we understand that really Brexit is UK imperialism to leave Africa. That's what we understand. But also, Glencore, one of the big mineral company, their truck exploded somewhere in the Congo. There's certain news, so I don't know the in out of it. At least 25 Africans died. And these guys come to Africa, loot our place, and use all these lorries and don't have no regard for anybody. And the lorry exploded. I'm sure it's a part of the process of them having no regard for us. 25 at least killed. I don't know how many wounded. And looking at how we're going to put a statement and possibly react to that. I know they have the headquarters in London. I just want people to be aware of it.
Uhuru.
That's the word, Chairman.
Yes, I just think that it's absolutely correct. We're talking about Brexit and England leaving the European Union. We need, that is Britain, Brexit exited the European Union. We need to force Brexit from Africa. Britain has to be pushed out of Africa. We know it's looting Africa to the extent of trillions of dollars annually, coming to British corporations of all kinds. So, and also I just want to say that we have coming up on May 26th and 27th, in Washington, D.C., African Liberation Day mobilization that the African People's Socialist Party is doing as a part of the African Socialist International. Comrade Luwezi Kinshasa will be speaking there as well. That's going to be in Washington, D.C. You can go to alduhuru.org and get more information on that. The theme of that is Africa for Africans at home and abroad. I want to thank Comrade Luwezi for being with us and thank all of you for being with us on today. We have to make this revolutionary struggle to win our freedom, and in order to do that, we have to have organization. Join the African People's Socialist Party, no matter where you are in the world. Become a part of the African Socialist International. That's going to be necessary for our liberation, unification as a land, as a people forcibly dispersed around the world. Uhuru.